Hey guys, this is the board report for our July of 2014 meeting. There's going to be two different videos. One, I wanted to go over what we as a board have accomplished in the past year because we've been dealing with and tackling some really huge board pieces, which is what we committed to do last July. And now we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary of that. And so I just wanted to sort of go over where we've been, what we've talked about, what we've accomplished, because we really have accomplished a lot. As you will recall, those of you who were here, which I guess is really our first accomplishment, that we have two brand new board members. That right there is pretty huge. So Justin and Alex, you were not here last July when we had this conversation, but that alone is a big accomplishment. What we talked about last July, and it actually came out of our June board meeting where we talked about what we wanted to talk about. We really asked the question, what does the board want to be discussing over the coming year? And the board felt overwhelmingly in our June 2013 meeting that we wanted to talk about our legal obligations. In July of 2013, we then asked, okay, which legal obligations and in what order? So we listed them all out, we matrixed them all out, and in the text underneath this video, I will share the link to where we actually matrixed all of this out. And so we decided in what order we wanted to discuss things like the financials, things like the budget process, things like the bylaws, things like our minutes, talking about our annual meeting. And we put those in order. And the order was, first we wanted to talk about the budget process, which we did this past fall. From there, we wanted to talk about our bylaws, which goodness knows we talked about. From there, we wanted to talk about our financials. What does the board want out of our financials? From there, talking about the minutes and then the annual meeting, which we haven't gotten to either of those yet. And so I just wanted to sort of share with you a little bit of perspective on how much we've accomplished that we said we wanted to. We knew that it was going to be some intensive, frequently theoretical discussions. The kinds of discussions that boards don't have when it comes to things like bylaws and financials. They just, rubber stamp whatever, and frequently just pull somebody else's bylaws and use that as a template. I wanted to talk a little bit about the three things we talked about. We spent at least one, I think maybe two meetings talking about the budget process. What can a budget process accomplish and what did we want it to accomplish for us? That was when we first had the conversation about budgeting not being just a cash in and out thing, but budgeting for all our resources. What will it take in terms of human resources? What will it take in terms of physical resources like desks and computers? What will it take in terms of knowledge resources? And yes, what will it take in terms of financial resources? How much of those resources, once we identify them, can we start identifying in our community that we can tap on? That we can husband, that we can nurture, that we can partner with to create a budget that is truly fleshed out. Just to let you know how much we have taken that to heart, that is how we're operating. It's not as if we weren't operating like that before. It wasn't as if that wasn't a big part of what we teach, but it became so front of mind when the board discussed it as a budget process that it has informed all of our planning, everything that we have done. Our work on the Pano project, and you could watch it online because they were all recorded, but when we had our discussions about the budget, they were talking about what will the physical resources need to be, what will our human resources need to be in all of these functional areas. Eventually, that became the immersion course that we did for Pano and the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County in Westmoreland County this past March. And when that was budgeted, it was budgeted in that full stone soup, what do we need approach, which allowed the Community Foundation there to tap on all kinds of resources throughout the community, bring them all together to create our being there. So I wanted you guys to know how much we had not only taken it to heart, but that we were living it, and that it has been guiding the work that we have been doing in every project that we have been budgeting for. that may not have translated directly as we have been having our recent financial conversation. What do we want from our financial statements, which has sort of sidetracked into it's hard to know what we want from everything until we have our planning conversation, really leading to that urgency for planning. But it is so in sync with husbanding and caring for and nurturing all our resources, which really stem from that budget conversation. The second piece of what we talked about, which again we took several meetings to do, was our bylaws. And again, looking at what do we want bylaws to accomplish. And I'm really convinced that the wrangling in that conversation, which lasted maybe 3 meetings, that's 6 hours, I think it will change what creating the future is at the core. The fact that we laid down the rules that if something didn't make sense, we weren't going to patchwork it. We weren't going to take all of the headings in the bylaws and say, well, okay, now how can we slide some creating the future language in there so that it feels right? No, we were going to blow it up and start over again and ask, what do we really need? What will reflect how we work? And how we work is systems and processes and inquiry and questions. And so the fact that we started with the bylaws and said, no, we're going to create a document that will tell us when we encounter this function that the board and the organization need to do. Here are the questions we'll ask. Here are the systems we'll use for figuring out what the answer is. Because what the answer is in 2014 will be very different than what the answer is in 2020. And if it is a process document, maybe we won't so often have to look at and revise bylaws as we did in the old days. That discussion has informed every other discussion that we have had so frequently, and many of you have been in those other meetings where we've talked about, yeah, what's really needed here is a process, not a checklist. What's needed is a system, not a checklist. Down to the point of an ebook that we are talking about creating that 6 months ago we thought was sort of a checklist of roles and functions, and really has become where those roles and functions come from and how we figure that out. So I really just wanted to share with you all that we have accomplished in this year of looking internally, because we said that's what we were going to do, was to look internally. I'm loving the fact that we're getting antsy to start looking externally, which is where that compulsion to do our planning is coming from, which is what we're going to discuss at the July meeting. But we promised ourselves that we would look deeply internally at our legal obligations and how those become functions that support the organization. And that's what we did. 2 things that became clear out of that as I've looked at how to implement this. One is that the board could use a board calendar, which is every September the board talks about X. Every August the board talks about X. That will be a helpful thing, again, in terms of process, for us to know that it's not, well, the annual meeting is coming and so we have to do this. It's no, these are discussions and systems and processes that we want to have in place to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks, and so that we are doing that every year. The second thing that has become clear, and in some of our board prep meetings, several of us have had this conversation, and that is the need to move from the question of what bylaws, for example, what financials, for example, make possible for the world at large, to then ask, what does the board's analysis of the financials make possible for creating the future, and what conditions need to be in place for us to accomplish that? That's that one practical piece that will continually bring us back to that link between the fact that the board is both a learning laboratory and the governing body of creating the future. So as we are learning what this makes possible for everyone else and how bylaws can be completely reinvented, we then can ask ourselves, what does this discussion make possible for creating the future, and what conditions need to be in place for us to put this into action right now? Which means I'm very, very excited for the year ahead and what we have upcoming. And so I will just look forward to our discussion on Monday of our planning, which is huge, which is exactly where we need to be. So, bye-bye.